Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and next week, Diablo 4's fate is decided. We're just a few days away from knowing whether the game will be saved, or whether most of you will continue to vote with the 80% over here. Oof. We also got this week some exciting news for last Epoch, and some truly crazy stuff is going down in Helldivers too. We'll talk about all of that in this video, timestamps below if you want to skip ahead. But before we dive in, a word from our sponsor, LG Ultra Gear. LG sent me their new Ultra Gear OLED gaming monitor, which comes in both 39-inch and 34-inch formats, and damn is it a beauty. I'll throw in some clips of me gaming on my 39-inch throughout this video to show it off. This is my first time using an ultra-wide monitor, and the in-game experience of running ultra-wide is just so incredibly immersive. You see so much more, you're almost surrounded by the game. It almost feels like cheating. It's a curved monitor with an 800 radius curvature, which is designed to reduce eye strain and also maximize immersiveness in games. I especially notice it playing shooters like Helldivers 2, where it just feels like the game is extending out naturally to my peripheral vision with no distortion in brightness or color, and it's got a 240Hz refresh rate, so you'll never miss a single frame of action. It's 1440p cinematic 21:9 ultra wide. It's got a 0.03 millisecond response time, so forget about any input lag while gaming. It's got a true OLED display, so you really have no issues looking at it from any angle. It's got an anti-glare, low reflection display, super thin border. It's got HDR. The only bad thing I can say about this monitor is that it made me realize how crappy my old monitors are. I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to properly fit this behemoth on my desk, but its slim unibody build and space-saving L stand minimizes dead space on your desk and lets you back this thing right up against the edge of your desk or right up against a wall if you need to. So check out this bad boy, the LG Ultra Gear OLED gaming monitor. Click the link in the description below, and you can actually win one of these beauties. Click the link for the Gleam giveaway event for a chance to get one for yourself. So kicking things off with some Helldivers 2 news. As we squeezed into last week's video, mechs were indeed released into the game last week. In fact, the devs confirmed that the factory planet was liberated 4 times faster than they expected. So good job, Helldivers. Now, one thing that people need to come to terms with the mechs, they are not walking tanks. They are relatively fragile. Think of them more as mobile weapons platforms, like a turret that you can walk around with, than as some kind of like defensive suit of armor, or some kind of like ultimate. They're really good at dealing with chargers. You know, the thing that everyone was complaining about for a few days before mechs were added in last week. Yeah, one rocket to the legs, strips the armor, then you finish them off with a chain gun. It's almost like they nerfed the means of dealing with armored targets right before they released into the game a new way to deal with armored targets. Like, it was all part of the plan, and that players just need to trust the devs before they lose their minds on Reddit and forums. Also, people should be aware that in Helldivers 1, players were asking for buffs to mechs, and the devs did not cave for years. For a full decade, Helldivers were asking for mechs to reload faster, to walk faster, to be tankier. The devs want to keep mechs balanced and not feel like a must-take stratagem. One thing we did see in Helldivers 1, though, was mechs gain the ability to call down stratagems while you're inside of them, so I think we may see this come to Helldivers 2 as well. Maybe even a buff to how much ammo mechs have. I think they had more ammo in Helldivers 1. Now, my personal definition of something being overpowered. If it will be stupid for someone to not take that thing is overpowered. We don't want anything in the game to be in that category, including mechs. In Helldivers 1, mechs were useful against bugs, but weak against bots, and that looks like the position they're in right now as well in Helldivers 2. Bugs don't shoot back and destroy your beautiful weapons platform. At least not yet. Who knows with these mutations now? We also got the patch this week that implemented the changes to armored Terminid enemies. They reduced the spawn rate of chargers and bile titans on difficulty 7 and higher. They've also reduced the odds of big spikes of these enemies showing up. However, they did not want to make the game easier, so they've readjusted the distribution of enemy types to account for the reduction in armored enemies. And I think this is a great way to balance the game. They're nerfing those enemies that people were complaining about, but they're buffing the numbers of other enemies that we're getting in other places so that it's still a net neutral on difficulty. They also lowered the health of the charger's head, so you can insta-kill him if your aim is good with the recoilless rifle or the expendable anti-tank. Oh, and speaking of those, in an undocumented change last week, the armor penetration of the anti-tank and the recoilless were increased. And this is a fact that would have certainly helped quell the tide of anger that we saw. So kind of a big oversight there from the devs that could have saved them a lot of headache if they had just said, guys, these guns can pierce armor more now. Then this week we got new major orders, which came in the form of a new mission available on bug-infested planets. Activate the Terminid control system on each planet. Once active, the system would inoculate each planet with termicide, quarantining the bugs, quote, permanently. Yeah, no one was buying it. Players were immediately suspicious of this final solution to the bug problem. Theories started to abound about what terrible outcome would come of this. My favorite theory was that the bugs would mutate in response to the chemicals, and we'd get flying bugs. And we got flying bugs. The devs didn't say a peep. They didn't put it in the patch notes or anything. Players just started to suddenly find flying bugs in-game, a whole new enemy type. It's not in the patch notes, nothing. Just a reveal as part of the ongoing narrative. And as soon as players started to report finding these bugs, the CEO tweeted, quote, "I've heard rumors of flying bugs in Helldivers too. I want to officially refute such preposterous claims. Everyone knows that bugs can't fly. And I'm not alone in thinking this. The Ministry of Truth agrees that this is propaganda from bug sympathizers that want to brainwash good people. Hashtag lies." I just love the meta-narrative around this game, the role-playing from the devs. I wish more games would do this. I'm genuinely excited to tune in and see what happens in the world of Helldivers every week. We also got this week the release of the new War Bond, Cutting Edge. War Bonds are Helldivers' version of Battle Passes, except they don't expire, so there's no FOMO, and you can earn premium currency just by playing the game, so you also don't have to spend any real money to get the Battle Pass stuff if you don't want to. This is the most ethical Battle Pass system I've ever seen. Anyone determined enough can just grind out some solo missions on trivial difficulty to get the premium currency. It's like they're not even trying to make money. Included in this War Bond is a stun grenade, which I hear can be really useful on higher difficulties. You can stun a Bile Titan for 5 seconds with it. I always thought that the free basic grenade that you start with was the best grenade, but this may be worth considering having in your party composition. There's also some new armor in the War Bond that provides 95% resistance to arc damage, which opens up new strategies. Not only can you walk past Tesla turrets now while barely taking any damage, you can also run ahead towards enemies and have your buddy shoot you with his arc, and you'll be like a lightning rod, with the lightning jumping to enemies around you, allowing your buddy to basically get kills beyond the arc's normal range, and you're pretty much not taking any damage from it. This is some crazy stuff, and I hope it broadens the meta and opens up new viable strategies. That said now, I'm always watchful of new things being overpowered. I don't think anything in the game should be OP, but especially not things that are locked behind premium currency, even in as ethical a system as we have in Helldivers 2. Yes, even though you can farm that currency for free. Now, I don't see anything yet that is OP, but I just never want a new player to jump into the game and feel like, oh, in order to get the best stuff, he needs to spend money now or suck until he grinds up the currency to unlock it. Then lastly for Helldivers 2, just to follow up on last week's story of the devs exchanging some words with players. All the devs in question have apologized at this point. The one evil boss guy from Discord, the one who basically rage quit the Discord server while saying get good, had this to say. "I acted like an ass, had a temper tantrum, realized that was a thing to do, both the community and to myself, so now I'm here trying to slowly make amends. I'm not expecting anyone to forgive me by just me coming back and saying sorry. Earning trust back is harder than earning it the first time. I gotta earn my respect first, and hopefully I can bring some amounts of Arrowhead with me. I acted like an ass to people, no denying that, and I don't want to pretend it didn't happen either. I will just try my best to earn respect back." Yeah, I made that statement while being way too pissed off, not a very chill attitude from me. I'm not gonna pretend I didn't act like an ass. Look, it takes a lot of maturity to acknowledge wrongdoing and apologize for it. There's a lot of like fake apologies that don't really admit to doing anything wrong. This is the full, sincere, as good as you get apology. And I know a lot of people would say he has nothing to apologize for. He was defending himself against players saying vastly worse things to him. And while that is true, at the end of the day, they're paying customers, and he's hurting the company's bottom line. Everyone in the service industry knows you crap talk customers in the back of the house, not to their face, no matter how much you want to. In the case of these devs, they can remove themselves from the situation entirely. They don't need to be dealing with people if they can't keep their cool while doing so. That said, it is kind of nice to see devs give crap back sometimes. Oh, and just before we finish out with Helldivers, another crazy thing started to happen this week. Someone reported an anecdote of being killed by a blue laser beam. And no bug or robot uses weaponry like that. He claimed it came from really far away and from an upward angle. So theories began to abound of this being the return of the Illuminate. This is the third faction of enemies from Helldivers 1. They're these super advanced aliens that use stealth, teleportation, and blue lasers. But other people explained away this anecdote as just this guy being mistaken. He was probably just killed by a meteor, right? Since they have blue trails. Well, more reports started to emerge. Someone claimed to see a rapid moving enemy on the radar, but then when he looked around, he couldn't find anyone. And then that blip disappeared. Could it have been a cloaked Illuminate who teleported away? Then someone put forth, in true UFO fashion, a potato quality picture of a screenshot of a blue laser beam killing them. Now, was it a Photoshop hidden behind being a picture of a screenshot so that we couldn't tell that it was a Photoshop? Well, finally, people started to capture actual footage of the exact blue laser beams that were first described, striking with incredible accuracy and either insta-killing or knocking down Helldivers. So, all this to say, folks, enemies of democracy have gone to extreme lengths to spread lies. These are the works of those who seek to undermine the unbreakable spirit of our great society. These rumors are nothing but hoaxes, fabrications concocted by the weak-hearted and the ill-intentioned. Our great democratic regime assures you that no threat exists beyond our current foes. It is the duty of every citizen, every Helldiver, to dismiss these absurd claims and focus on the real enemy. Remember, the strength of our unity has always been our greatest weapon. Our esteemed leaders and unmatched military might are continuously at work to safeguard our way of life. Trust in them, trust in us, and above all, trust in the indomitable human spirit that has always prevailed. Alright, moving on to some last Epoch news. The devs sent out a survey last Friday to get the community's feedback on mid-cycle balance changes. Previously, their position was to avoid fixing bugs during a patch cycle that were causing skills or items to overperform, if the fix would make those things significantly weaker. Basically, you'll have some players using these skills or items not realizing that they're bugged, and if all of a sudden they're heavily nerfed out of nowhere due to a bug fix, well, it's a bad player experience for those people, right? However, after the survey, the devs came out and said that the community feedback was quite clear. Players do want bugs to be fixed immediately when they are causing skills and items to overperform, but they also want to be notified in advance via public forum posts anytime a bug fix, or balance change for that matter, will nerf a highly performing build. And so they did just that. This week, they plan to release 2 major bug fixes. The Profane Veil Warlock skill was giving 10 times more ward than it was stated to be giving, so that's going to be fixed. And the Rune Master's Sanguine Runestones passive, which as an added effect makes 15% of your health regen apply as ward, was accidentally scaling with the number of points allocated when it shouldn't have been, and so that's being fixed to no longer do so. Ward was basically busted in a couple of places, so these are good changes that bring the game into a healthier state of balance. I'll also add that it's really important that all players vote in these surveys. Whenever they go out, whenever you hear that there's a survey, go vote, people. You don't want the squeaky wheels to be the people steering the direction of the game. Make your voice heard too. Just imagine in your head the average loudmouth complainer and think to yourself, is that the person that I want? The only voice going out to the devs telling them what to do. So again, patch 1.0.3 went out this week, including the bug fixes, the stash tab price reductions that we spoke about last week, which results in the cost of larger numbers of stash tabs basically being cut in half, which I gotta tell you is not helping my hoarding problem. But also the single greatest change with this patch, they have reduced the frequency at which the Falconer's Falcon makes its caw sound. I love my falconer, don't get me wrong, but the bird was driving me insane. We also got word on things that devs are working on, courtesy of Judd. Posting in Reddit in response to a feedback thread, Judd said that they're planning to make changes to blessings, such that when you unlock a blessing, you keep its highest roll, and then you can swap blessings at any time. So if you want to change to a previous blessing that you had, you don't have to rerun the entire monolith and do the boss again. This is a great change. And in response to complaints about having to run an entire dungeon every time just to craft a legendary, he said that they're open to hearing suggestions, but that they want legendary crafting to be something that is earned. So it sounds like they're not going to just remove the dungeon requirement and let you craft from in town. He also suggested that stash tab affinities will come. For those who don't know what that means, imagine that you can assign a stash tab a category of item. And then whenever you move items from your inventory into your stash, they automatically go into the relevant tab. So let's say you assign a tab the idle affinity, then whenever you deposit an idle into your stash, it's gonna zoop right into the idle tab without you having to find and select that tab. Great quality of life option here. Then for those who make a lot of alts, they're adding a catch-up mechanic where, not catch-up, where you can... They're adding a catch-up mechanic where you get stability faster on alts, thus allowing you to unlock your blessings faster. They also have many updates planned for the loot filter. I can't even imagine what those are going to be since they already have the best loot filter in the genre. Altogether, great stuff. In some Diablo 4 news, we're about a week and a half into the launch of the Gauntlet, Diablo's leaderboard activity. Every week is a new Gauntlet and a new opportunity to prove yourself on the leaderboards. And, well, week 1 of the Gauntlet was fraught with exploits, and it's seeming like week 2 isn't any better. There were ultimately 2 things at play, one of which was fixed. First, players found a way to enter the Gauntlet without actually starting the Gauntlet, meaning you can go in, run around, kite all the enemies into ideal positions for maximum density, then you start the Gauntlet timer, and you have an incredible advantage. This was fixed as far as I'm aware, but the next thing we're going to talk about wasn't as of the time of this recording. Shrine effects are not wiped from you when you start a Gauntlet. So, what do? If you spend one Gauntlet run collecting all the bosses together, killing them all at the very end to get a bunch of shrine buffs, just as your Gauntlet ends, then you get to start your next Gauntlet run with all of those shrine buffs. Again, an enormous advantage. Now, I do imagine this will be fixed, I'm not sure when, and I also do suspect that obvious exploiters will not be included in the Hall of the Ancients in the long run if we're to base ourselves on how they handled exploiters in Diablo 3. Now, on top of this week we also got our rewards for the week 1 Gauntlet, and many players are underwhelmed. Overall, I'm okay with the Gauntlet not being an incredibly rewarding activity, but it does seem that the current state of rewards, basically some random item level 925 items, is not enough to really motivate people to do this every week, since you can just end up with a bunch of vendor trash. At the start of a season, those 925s can be incredibly valuable, but we're largely past that part of the season where most players are still gearing. In Diablo 3, doing the weekly challenge rift gave you a bag of valuable resources, saving you time on having to farm those resources in activities that we didn't like doing. It was always worth doing that challenge rift, unless it was a particularly difficult week and the time required to try again until you beat it was longer than the time needed to actually farm those resources. But all that to say, I think adding some resources to the Gauntlet loot bags, I'm not sure what exactly, but just things that people find tedious to farm otherwise, I think that would be a great idea to keep these Gauntlet loot bags useful throughout an entire season and not result in bad RNG just giving a bag of garbage. Now, all of this together goes to show, once again, that even a few days of PTR would have caught a lot of this before launch. So I'm very pleased that we're getting a PTR for Season 4. And speaking of, we got confirmation that the campfire chat for the massive Season 4 changes will be next week, Wednesday, March 20th at 11 a.m. PDT. It'll cover changes to affixes, item stats, the Codex of Power, and new in-game systems as well coming in Season 4, along with our first look at the season itself. I think we're going to see what the season theme is. I've been holding out a lot of hope for this patch. The things that they're touching upon here, item affixes, right? We have the immense affix bloat, the whole damage on Tuesdays meme. It sounds like they're addressing that. Item stats, not too sure what that could mean. It's unclear what the difference between affixes and stats are, but overall a hard look at itemization in general. Then the Codex of Power, people have been asking for changes there. So who knows what we're going to see there? Are we going to see something where you're able to, something that's going to fix our stash bloat, having to carry all of these legendary aspects? Are they going to be stored now in the Codex of Power? We're going to find all of this out next week. Again, I've been holding out hope for this patch. I hope this is going to be Diablo 4's Loot 2.0, because Loot 2.0 is what saved Diablo 3 and really turned things around for the game. Also, Adam Fletcher confirmed that all the changes will happen on day 1 of Season 4 rather than a delayed release like we saw with the Gauntlet. Stay tuned for next week. Oh, and also ray tracing is coming to Diablo 4 on March 26th for those who have an NVIDIA RTX card. Ray tracing adds more realistic lighting, reflections, and shadows, and it's coming to D4 2 days before D4 releases on Xbox Game Pass. Then, ending things with some quick Path of Exile news, we've had multiple teasers for the next expansion, Necropolis, complete with almost a full-on Crypt Keeper voiceover teasing us before the full reveal, which will happen on March 21st at 1 p.m. PDT. Necropolis itself will launch on March 29th, and from all the teasers, this looks like it's going to be the season of quality of life changes. Lots of things addressing repetitive clicking. Wrist strain could be a problem in the ARPG genre, and this looks like it'll help with that. Bulk trading will be easier. Breach hands will open just by walking over them without clicking, and a lot more. We also learned that Affliction League will not be going core, sadly. This was a fan favorite league, and people are going to miss it. Then in PoE 2 news, Jonathan Rogers had an interview with Preach Gaming in which we learned that the devs are really focusing on ensuring players have a great first-time experience with PoE 2. We've all heard stories about how onboarding was an issue with PoE 1. A new player opens their skill tree and just nopes right out. Jonathan said that they don't want to sacrifice the type of complexity that makes the game good, but they do want to simplify things that don't need to be complex. Jonathan also cleared up some misconceptions. PoE 2 is not intended to be slower than PoE 1, and also in their testing, their beta testing, under NDA with first-time users, there apparently were not many complaints about the game being too hard. So those were two things that I saw people repeating a lot, that the game is going to be slower and a lot harder, and apparently that's not going to be the case. Or at least that it won't be too hard. Now, all that said, they also don't want to sacrifice difficulty in the name of creating a more approachable game. They're not just making a super casual-friendly game here. And they are still not going to let us skip the campaign. That's going to wrap up this video. But do be sure to check out last week's video in which we spoke about how the Helldivers 2 devs were fighting back against player criticism. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Special thanks to my supporters for making these videos possible, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.